the fiscal arithmetic is something that has been questioned. People are questioning the revenue assumptions that have been made by the government and the credibility then of the fiscal deficit number. But this is not a new problem. We've seen this budget after budget. The government confident of being able to meet the fiscal deficit number and the fiscal consolidation glide path. Now, Moody's has come down hard on the government, calling it a credit negative. But corporate heavyweights like Deepak Parekh have played down that minor slippage, saying that this is par for course in an election year. Take a look.
I don't think the market will be rattled by a 0.1% increase in fiscal deficit. And there is a logical reason given by the finance minister that because of the farm distress, because of very low inflation in food prices, the farmers across the country are having a very tough time. And therefore, even in this year, they've allocated 20,000 crores and next year 75,000 crores. So the finance minister clearly mentioned that if you take this out, the deficit next year would have come down to 3.1%. So I don't think this is going to rattle anyone. A very, very marginal increase in fiscal deficit is not going to impact us at all.
Farm relief package was smaller than some had believed or feared. That's about 0.3% of next year's GDP. If you look at the tax rebate, it's about 0.1% of next year's GDP. So the real question is to stick to 3.4 next year. Where will the incremental 0.4% of GDP come from? Is it coming from some rationalization in expenditure, which will make it more credible? Or is it coming from the revenue side? We haven't got the details of what the tax buoyancy is. If it's all expected to come from tax buoyancy, I think that's a little bit ambitious next year, unless there is significant tightening of GST compliance over the next 9-10 months and GST collections next year jump up meaningfully.
The nice thing about it is that 3.4 is not that bad. Of course, we have to watch the currency very carefully because on one hand, they may be giving us very good consumption patterns, but on the other hand, you may see a weakening of the currency. So we have to look at what the currency is doing as well.
Expenditure side also, we have provided for every expenditure which we needed to provide, including, as I said, for the farm package. And therefore, fiscal math for the next year is very reasonable and realistic in my judgment. We are very conscious that we don't have to borrow very much.
It demonstrates unambiguously that this government is not one which will succumb to populism or to fiscal profligacy. I mean, one could have expected, as in 2009 and then 2014, that the finance minister could have made it what you could call an election budget, and got about distributing, sort of funds and doling out, sort of largesse to everybody, as previous finance ministers have done, but not so in this case. It's a very balanced budget. It has kept the fiscal, balance in place. And as he explained, the finance minister explained that if you just exclude the farmers' package, the fiscal deficit is at 3.1%, which is what the glide path was.
There will be a borrowing, plus there will be increase in taxation. Not increase in taxation. The tax collections are likely to go up by about 15% over the RE of this year, and so we expect that with GDP growth at the rate at which it is growing, we will have better buoyancy and better collection of taxes, which should be able to finance a large part of the fiscal deficit. Plus, there should be better compliance with formalization of the economy. So we are quite optimistic that the fiscal slippage which is there from 3.1 to 3.4, which is currently being shown in our interim budget, should improve when we get into financial year 1920.
Overall fiscal deficit is already targeted. That target will be met, and therefore it is just slipping a very small little amount. But also, if you really look at it, the GDP, if GDP grows, the real numbers of expenditure in comparison to the overall GDP, then will look even much smaller. So the fiscal deficit is that what we should really target at. And if the economy is growing, and with the rural economy also pushing the growth even further, because consumption will grow, that means people will buy more, that again will push the economy even to a higher trajectory of growth. If that happens, and that will happen, then that means the fiscal deficit will not be of such a concern that we all feel about.
No, I don't think it's such a large deviation. I mean, it is true that the fiscal deficit is somewhat higher than the budgeted number. But on the other hand, take a wider look. I mean, the fact of the matter is, till not very long ago, we used to debate, between 4.5% or 5.5% of GDP. Nowadays, we get panicked about 3.3 and 3.4 or 3.5. So I think we have made a lot of progress. Moreover, I think the more interesting point, which nobody seems to be discussing, is that the primary deficit has actually been kept well in control. So if you look at the primary deficit, in fact, it has done better than what had been budgeted. It's at 0.2% of GDP. Essentially, there is no primary deficit to speak of. Our fiscal deficit effectively is because of interest payments that have on debt accumulated over many years.
Well, it is now time to hear it from the budget makers themselves. We posed questions to them on the disinvestment target, the fiscal consolidation roadmap, the mechanics of the farm package, and how all of it will come together. Here are the men from North Block on CNBC TV 18.
On the tax side, the growth rate assumed for the next year is only about 14.8%.
Conservative.
It's, I think, reasonably conservative. We have seen taxes grow at about 20% on direct taxes side for the last 2 years. On the indirect taxes, now with GST settling down, etc., we have assumed still lower growth rate, in all giving it about 14.8%. So 14.8% growth rate assumption, to my mind, is very realistic for the next year. If you have a nominal growth rate of about 11.5%, 12%, then getting 14.5% or 15% rate of growth on taxes should be quite reasonable. And with the economy picking up now and the rate of growth exceeding 7.5%, and therefore that estimate to my mind is very realistic. We are very conscious that we don't have to borrow very much from the market.
There will be a borrowing. Plus there will be increase in taxation. Not increase in taxation, the tax collections are likely to go up by about 15% over the RE of this year. And so we expect that with GDP growth at the rate at which it is growing, we will have better buoyancy and better collection of taxes, which should be able to finance a large part of the fiscal deficit.
Well, you should look at two things. A, the trend. If we see the trend for last 3 years, this year included, we have hit the target. Last year we even exceeded it because of one large transaction.
This year you're sticking to the B.
We are again sticking to B is equal to RE this year. Next year again it's in the same range, just 10,000 crore more. However, every year we are adding new instruments as well as bringing in new companies to the fold. In a sense, number of PSUs don't increase, but the instrument that we largely used are market-related instruments. So we are adding almost 10 more companies into the fresh listing. 6 recently done by CCA and 4 which are spillover.
So they are all slated for the next financial year?
So they get slated for financial year, and not only the proceeds from IPO, then their shares get added on for OFS, they get added on for ETFs and so on and so forth. So they become available for a lot of instruments.
There is absolutely change in the taxpayers' mindset now, and we are getting a higher returns. Number of returns are increasing, the tax base has gone up, and the per return income has also gone up. That is why we could get a tax growth rate of 18% last year. Before that it was 15%. So we are continuously getting a good tax growth, and the persons are moving from a non-tax compliant society to a tax compliant society. And we want that the more taxpayers should be honest, because we are having a faith on the taxpayers. We are not scrutinizing 99.54% the returns at all. We are taking only 0.46% as the returns in the scrutiny. And everything is online. So we are creating a system where the honesty should be given a benefit, honesty should be encouraged. So the persons are coming more into the tax net, and I am sure, because still there are 2 months left, and the buoyancy is there. So we will definitely get 12 lakh crore. There's no problem into that.
See, we have already committed ourselves. We have already lost 80,000 crore because of the tax reduction, and last 1 year series of reductions have taken place, and that has also resulted in the tax, the base has been increased, people have been complying more, and that is the reason why this month itself we have reached the target of 1,02,000 crore. And in time to come, another 2 months, definitely the trend would continue, the increase in taxation base.
When we talk about the revenue loss, first of all, the GST is a new phenomenon. It was introduced on July 1st, 2017. We are under the stabilization phase. So we have adjusted lots of tax rates. If you see the tax rate, the relief that has been given by the GST Council during the last 1.5 years, that amounts to almost 90,000 crores per annum. And even with that, we have this year, if we see our average collection last year used to be 89,000 crore every month. This year it is around 95,000 crores. And then this month, January, as we declared yesterday, that we have already crossed 1 lakh crore for this month. So the revenue trends are encouraging.
There is in fact very large amount of tax buoyancy that is expected. So there is an expectation that this money will indeed come in, particularly from direct taxes. So there is fair amount of buoyancy in direct taxes that is there if you look at the budget at a glance, that has been put together. Well, first of all, I think you have got to have some trust in what the kind of information we have based our forecasts on. And also remember that, the next year's forecast is not out of whack. I mean, if you take, let's say, 7.5% GDP growth rate, which is, will be par for the course, take 4% inflation and allow for very small buoyancy in tax collections, particularly the income tax side, you would get those numbers. It doesn't require a very complex and very ambitious forecasts to get those kinds of numbers.
So another budget is done and dusted, and it is now time for election 2019. That is the big battle. Has the interim budget changed the narrative in favor of the government? Will it help the incumbent romp back to power in light of a united opposition? Promises to be an exciting time. But for this evening, from all of us here, we wrap up our marathon coverage. Thanks very much for watching.